Welcome to the Recovery Centered Podcast, the space for honest conversation about healing, hope, and the journey through mental health and addiction recovery. Each episode, we sit down with people making a difference, from therapists and researchers to change makers and to survivors. Now to explore what recovery really looks like in the world. This podcast is produced in collaboration with Beachway Therapy Center. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Recovery Center podcast. My name is Tim Roberto. I am definitely your host, and what an honor that is to be, and what an honor it is to do what I do. And today's guest, I feel honored that we're going to chop it up and we're going to inform our audience, about recovery and recovery centered. Frank Galimiti is the CEO of Sunview Wellness and Behavioral Health, executive with more than 23 years of experience in addiction treatment. His background spans clinical care, operations, program development, business growth, and organizational turnaround. He is known for building strong teams, improving treatment systems, and helping programs grow without losing their clinical integrity. And I can vouch for that. Frank, thank you for the welcome to the Recovery Center podcast. I'm honored to have you on as a guest, and thank you for saying yes.
Well, I'm thrilled to be on here. I know we've been talking about it for a long time, and it's time. I'm really happy that we finally got a chance to kind of connect this way.
Yeah.
And it's an honor. I was just saying, we were talking a little bit ahead of time. If you would have told me all these years ago when I started, I'd be sitting on a show, talking about recovery or treatment or anything like that, I would have said you're out of your mind.
Yeah.
So the idea that I get an opportunity, to do this now as a big part of my job is such an honor and a pleasure. It really is. So thank you so much.
Yeah. It's I think it's just amazing when I'm reading, your bio. I can sidetrack quickly sometimes, and I can see squirrels sometimes. And I wanted to just stop and say to the audience, everything you're hearing about that bio is true, and it's authentic, and it's real, because I've known Frank a really long time, and he's always been a dedicated professional, a dedicated person, a committed person. And I think so committed, so dedicated, so professional that sometimes he's going to tell you what you don't want to hear because it's called the truth. And if Frank knows, I know, and anybody else that works in this field, it's like that phenomenon, right, Frank? The truth kind of weakens the illness or the disease of addiction. It's the craziest thing.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that I talk about a lot is I call it carefrontation. It's like I will be brutally honest and candid with clients, and I'll tell them, listen, are you open to me telling you the truth? And it's not because I want to hurt you. Is it going to bring up feelings? Absolutely. But I kind of have to let you see what some of your patterns are. And in order for you to be able to stay, clean and sober long term, we need to change these patterns. You and I were just kind of talking a little bit ahead of the show. There's a lot of clients and a lot of people that we know that have kind of gone through a lot of these programs, and they've been great clients. They really have. They participate in group, they get involved in the community and all this kind of stuff. But they end up becoming, clients that bounce in and out of treatment. And that's because there's usually one or two things that they don't want to talk about, or they don't want to address, or they don't want to see, for a lot of different reasons, usually because it hurts really bad. That kind of keeps them stuck in this pattern. And the pattern, the recidivist pattern that we've all seen in treatment, have been kind of talking about now, in practice now, I guess, for the last 15 years. I call it the I equals addict mentality, or the I equals sick mentality. My whole identity is wrapped up in being sick. And unfortunately, sometimes for some people, there's a secondary gain for that. And that's why the couple of things that are really painful to change, sometimes we don't, because of that, because of what might happen if I actually changed and got better. We want to see clients thrive in the community. We want them to go out there and feel capable again, and well, maybe for the first time, being quite honest. And in order to do that, sometimes we need to face some hard realities of what's going on in their lives.
Yeah, that sickness, boy, man, that's so true. It's kind of almost like a relationship. It's like you have a relationship with something that just soothes you. You know how to operate in it. You know how to move around in it. I work with a lot of people like you do too, and I always ask these people, if you were to discharge today, would you leave with something that you brought in here with that you haven't put on the table?
Yeah, and then that's the whole idea. And I say this all the time. I still run group on Monday night. It's something that in spite of my position, I'll really never give up completely. It's
Yeah,
something
don't,
that
Frank. Yeah,
why I
don't.
got into the field. I got into the field to help people, and it
Yeah.
just so happened I hung around long enough that I ended up somehow being an executive, right? But with all that being said, one of the things that I always say to the clients is like, listen, we have to leave no stone unturned, and the things that you don't want to talk about are usually the things that hurt you the most, and
Yeah.
that really are anchoring to your addiction. And those are the things that we have to challenge. So of course, we here, my background, we do a lot of like Adlerian kind of therapy and psychodynamic stuff, inner child therapy. My belief is that your unfinished business from the past will finish you off when you're an adult. And that kind of work hurts, and that kind of work takes time,
Yeah.
and unfortunately, one of the things that I've identified is that clients aren't getting as much time and as much opportunity to kind of do that kind of work as they used to in the past because of the kind of shift in what the treatment industry is kind of pushing, over the last bunch of years, really, which is shorter duration of stay kind of model, detox and res, which obviously we know are super important for everybody. People need to get stable. They do. They need to get stable. But that's what we do to get sober. This other piece that we're talking about now, which is really leaving no stone unturned and delving into the underpinnings of addiction, that stuff takes time, and that can't get done in a 28-day, cycle, in a detox residential cycle. Those levels of care are really designed to get you ready to be able to do the work that you need to do to actually make this a lifestyle that will last for somebody.
For sure.
And that's a really big part of my mission at this point, this point in my career, is really to stress how important these extended levels of care, or the lower levels of care, of what we call them in the industry, how critically important they are for the success of our clients. Clients need to go through adversity. They need to have time to kind of work through things happening in their daily life with the support of therapy and groups and camaraderie and AA and NA and all these kinds of things. And you can't do that in 28 days. It's just not enough time.
No, it's possible. How do you do it in 28 days with something that was years in the making?
That's right.
Like you were talking about childhood, it's like you're programmed to be something you're not. And all this stuff that was programming you back in the day follows you right into your adulthood. The only thing that's changed is your body, like physically you've changed, but all that childhood stuff, all that programming came right with you, and it's
That's right. And you carry that into every single relationship that you have, unless you actually start working through it and starting, developing a new identity,
correct.
Which is really what I believe is one of the greatest opportunities that comes along through sobriety, right? Is you get to develop a new identity. I don't have to look at myself as that person, that sick person, or that sick member of my family, or the person that's incapable. Unfortunately, we all go through things as we're growing up, whether they be, what we identify as kind of classic trauma, or we just messages that got communicated that we internalized, right? It could be as big as, divorce or death of a family member, and it could be as small but important to you as somebody saying something negative about your weight, or about how you performed on a test, or somebody saying that they didn't like the kind of clothes you were wearing, or, hey, your family's got no money. And if it's something that ends up, really resonating and kind of getting internalized, that really starts to frame who we become as adults, unless we kind of process through that stuff. And so many of our clients, they and I'm sure you've run thousands of groups, and as have I. Hey, my childhood was great. Nothing was ever wrong. We had money, we went on vacations and all this kind of stuff. And when you start digging into it with them, there's some shame messages that got communicated to them somewhere, and
it's funny.
They don't even realize how much of an impact it's had.
No, I mean, you only operate on what you know. It's not what you don't know. It's funny you bring that up. Gosh, last week I had a guy like that and everything was great. They're like, great. And I'm like, okay, I can't help, I got to dig, right? So I was like, okay, everything was great. No disrespect to the parents or your family, system. Was there anybody? Was there a parenting style? Either one of mom or dad? Did they have a critical parenting style? Did they have a perfection focused driven parenting style? No, no. Was dad a workaholic? Yes. And then of course, bing. I'm like, okay, let's poke around to see if work was more important than him. So you got the workaholic. Not right now, son. I got to go do this. I got to do this. Not right. I had a long day, son. Maybe in another hour or so. And then it just never materializes to anything. And we kind of like grow up invisible in that lane. So there's all these parenting styles, right? Like the narcissistic parenting style,
Sure.
the workaholic, the perfection focused driven parent, the critical parent, the sociopathic parent, the depressed parent. Like there's just so many staple parenting styles. Like it's just
Sure. And again, one of the things that I always say is, especially when we start digging and going into this,
yeah,
deeper kind of work or psychodynamic work, we call it, right? Is that, hey, we're not looking to place blame, but we're helping to help you start to put the dots together about like, well, how did I end up here? Because unfortunately, those of us that do this for a living and have been in recovery for a long time,
yep.
You almost like to take for granted, well, this is why this happened and I understand this now and whatever it might be. But so many of our clients, they really don't have any idea. It's like, well, why did I use? Well, because, I like the way it felt and all this kind of stuff, when it really comes down to a lot of, at the end of the day, it's more about what I don't have to feel when I'm under the influence than it is the euphoria, especially by the time the clients reach you and I and our peers that are listening to this in treatment. Somebody that's willing to basically get to the point where they're willing to die to not feel goes to show that there's pain, right? And I haven't met anybody in the 23 years that I've been doing this, right, that doesn't have some kind of form of trauma that's sitting in our group rooms.
Correct.
Ever.
Correct.
It might not be very they might not be very aware of it at the beginning, but as we start doing the work with them and they stay committed and they're willing to get involved and process with peers and give feedback and get feedback, then they, hopefully what starts to happen is people start to become very well aware of why they're doing what they're doing, and that's a big start for a lot of people. It's so critically important. And being quite honest, I do believe that it's starting to become de-emphasized in treatment. Again, as I said before, doing these really short durations of stay, which has been the model that we're seeing pop up more and more. You can't do that kind of work. You can't. There's just not enough time. There's not enough trust. I mean, think about how much trust it takes to develop that kind of level of rapport with a therapist or even the peers in your group to actually be willing to go into stuff and talk about stuff that hurts like that. I hate to say it, but if you take a look at like a detox res, and again, it's super important. Let's take a look at 28 days. That first week, I'm sick as a dog and I'm just getting used to being there. Yep. Maybe I get to do a little bit of clinical work for 2 weeks and then I'm thinking about discharge planning. So, that's kind of the way that it goes. So how can I possibly delve into the stuff that I need to delve into to actually make sure that this lasts? Because that's the whole idea, hopefully when people are going into treatment, especially the people that are intrinsically motivated, they're going in because they want to get recovery and they want to stay sober. They don't want it to be just another stop on the way to another treatment center, because that's painful.
Yeah.
It is. It's painful.
Yeah, it's I don't know, man. Like just the way addiction moves, it's so insidious and it's so dark and it's so like kind of like some of the literature says, cunning, powerful, and baffling. Like to keep getting seduced by it, to keep going back to that pain, to keep going back into the ring with the undisputed champ it just blows my mind, Frank. Like there's nothing that operates like this thing. Like who would do that? With some other examples, like.
Well, it goes to show how powerful it is, right? And we all know that addiction is not a moral issue, right? Because we sit down and we talk with our clients. They're good people. They really are. You sit in groups a lot of times, and if somebody off the street walked in, a stranger, they would never know what kind of group we were sitting in because they look just like you and me. It's not the stereotype that everybody thinks about. But unfortunately, I think one of the things that's happened is, and I don't necessarily believe it was by design, but especially when you look at, areas where there's high concentrations of treatment and people, in early recovery anyhow, is that I'm already struggling with kind of working past this identity and all that kind of stuff. And then, the treatment center industry, I hate to say it this way, somebody that's part of it, but it's kind of taken on the role of like the enabling parent where, this unhealthy pattern of getting sober, being in early recovery, self-sabotage, relapse, and start back at the beginning in treatment has kind of gotten reinforced over and over again. So if I even have any bit of doubt about my ability to stay sober, there's somebody and there's messages that are getting communicated like, well, it's okay. What's the worst thing that could happen? You'll just go back to treatment again. And I think that it leads to rationalization for some people because they see patterns. If many of my peers, if I'm in early recovery, and if many of my peers, the message that gets communicated by them just through their behavior and what we see is, well, this is normal, right? It's a maladaptive behavioral pattern. Like, hey, it's normal just to be in a perpetual state of early recovery, less than 1 year and then go back to treatment and bounce from place to place or bounce from sober living to sober living. So if I'm already struggling, because there's things that come along with being in long-term sobriety, right? Like, responsibility,
real life,
right?
life.
Having to own your decisions and all those kinds of things. But when I'm in active addiction, the expectations that I have of myself, and being quite honest, the expectations that other people have of you go down. It becomes like, hey, just don't die.
Yeah.
Don't get locked up. Yep. Everything else is okay, and unfortunately, I believe that, some clients, they start to kind of buy into that. Well, this is kind of normal, the way that people are in and out. This guy's been in treatment 6 times. This guy's been in treatment 8 times. This guy's been in treatment 10 times.
Yeah.
It starts to become normalized, and it kind of softens the blow of making the decision to pick up and use again. If I'm already struggling and I made the consequences not look so bad, here we go. That's what starts to happen.
And it's so frustrating. Like, like listening to you, I'm thinking, man, this thing's like the undisputed champ, when it comes to like rationalization, justification, creating an image in your head of what it thinks it's supposed to be like instead of what it already is. It's just amazing. But as devastating as this thing is, because like sobriety, recovery, I think, it's a privilege denied many, if not most, because it's a different kind of hard. Like learning how to live life on life's terms is just a different kind of hard.
Absolutely.
But it's really frustrating. I'm sure you have it too. I have my days too. Like physically, if you're sticking a needle in your arm because you don't like how you feel, physically you're screwed. If you're drinking a case of beer every day, you're screwed because once it goes in, you can't stop. But Frank, like, I know you're on the same quest as me. Like, I try to make it as simple as possible so the person can grab it because the power's in the simplicity with this thing, not the complexity. And I always go after their thinking, and I always tell them straight up, look, man, physically, I think you're screwed. But between you and I, if you really want to, we can help you change your thinking because it's your thinking that keeps putting it in, nothing else. And I think that's a tremendous gift, and that really intrigues me, Frank. Like, I have this fatal progressive illness, this, like you said, it's not a moral issue, it's a brain disorder. There's something short-circuiting. I have this incredible ability to change my thinking with a fatal progressive illness. That's what kind of like blows me away. Like you have parents down in the Children's Hospital in Miami or something, and their little daughter, they've been given the letter, hey, we've done everything we can, get your ducks in a row, the bone, the blood disease is just, we can't do it, blah, blah. And then we go in there and go, oh, no, it's okay. Physically, yeah, she's kind of screwed, but if we can change her thinking, she has to do it every day, one day at a time, and maybe after a while you'll start seeing her hair will grow back, and you'll catch her playing on the bed with the nurse. Just change her thinking, and she'll get well.
I get it. I get it completely. I think from my perspective, a lot of times, unfortunately, what the addiction does, and really is cunning, baffling, powerful, is it convinces us that the feelings that are going to come along with with dealing with our issues, our problems, our trauma, our day to day, it's going to be so overwhelming that the feeling is going to kill us.
Mm.
So the choice becomes like either I'm going to, navigate this and the feeling's going to kill me, or I'm going to go self-medicate, right?
Mm.
And I think that anybody that's in recovery could identify with that. I think that one of the things that we get to do as therapists is help the clients navigate those things and see that,
Mm.
hey, yes, that feeling was horrible and it was painful, but you know what? You navigated it. You were able to do it. And, not to beat a dead horse, but that's why I think that, these lower levels of care that, that I specialize in it and, that my team specializes in are so important because, people need to be able to see that they are capable in their day-to-day life, not just in a controlled environment. I call it the in-vivo treatment approach, right? Where, here, at Sunview, the clients don't live with us, right? They live at home. A few of them live in some sober living facilities, but most of them live at home. And when they walk out of group with us, they're going back to their families that might have some dysfunction. They're going back to their jobs that might be difficult. They're going back into financial discord and all this kind of stuff. And then getting to a place that they see that they can navigate those issues without picking up a drug or a drink starts to help them build feelings of capability, right? It improves your self-esteem and it changes your self-concept, the way you start to think of yourself, which I think is such a big component of addiction. It convinces you that you are not capable and not deserving of doing better.
Hands down.
That's what it does. It convinces you that you're deserving of suffering. You're incapable of taking care of yourself. Why is so-and-so able to navigate their life? Why is so-and-so able to carry a job and I can't? Why is so-and-so able to be a parent and I can't? And unfortunately, for a lot of our clients, a lot of them have had experiences with relapse and they get re-traumatized, every time that happens. And they really start to believe, wow, no, it's true. Yeah. I'm incapable.
Yeah.
And one of the greatest things that one of the greatest pleasures of my life and really has been my mission is to help them start to be able to challenge that. No, that's not true.
Amen.
You are capable. Look at what you just did there. Look at what you were able to accomplish in spite of all this adversity you have going on, right? Your family's, is struggling. Maybe you have addiction in your household.
Yep.
All these kinds of things. And in spite of all that, you still didn't pick up and you're still showing up here every day. And then you went and got a job and it's like you're learning how to balance. Wow, look how far you've come.
Yeah.
And I think that that's what our clients need to see. They need to be able to see that and interact with other people that are doing that too. I can't de-emphasize, or I can't emphasize enough how important like that camaraderie that that the clients have with each other and with the staff and all that stuff, how important it is for somebody to get better.
Very important.
I can't stress it enough. And again, it's another one of those things that I see that's kind of getting made into a second-class citizen.
Yeah.
It's not as important in some of these higher levels of care to do that. And that to me is sad. It's sad. There's a big piece that's missing.
Yeah, I think that like you were doing, that reinforcement is so it's critical. It's like one of the key components, because everybody has worth. Everybody has worth, and if we can help people figure out their worth through experience, like you were talking about, you're teaching people how to go through it, not around it. And when I can teach people how to go through it, then they have these experiences, just like when they took their first crack on the head from somebody when they were a little boy. They experienced that, and that altered the course of their life in that moment. Well, things like what you're doing, what I'm doing, and other people that are kind of, in the trenches, sort of say, doing because they've been called to do it. It's a beautiful thing to watch somebody have experiences and teach them how to go through it. And, a lot of us say, well, I don't know. Why are you treating so? I don't know. Well, then I can only imagine how I can help this person if they begin to know. Because this same person can leave the house with no money and get high for a week. And you're telling me you can't do it. You don't have resources. You don't, you're doing better than you think you are.
I want you to, and I want everybody that's listening to kind of think about what we're talking about, right? So we're talking about, human connection,
Mm.
right? And real feedback and real therapy. And I think it's so important, that we stress how critically important that is for people to get better.
Mm.
Okay. There is no recovery without doing this part of treatment. It doesn't work. Okay. Listen, the studies show that 40 to 60% of people, and the studies have been exactly the same since I started doing this in 2003, that 40 to 60% of people relapse within the first 90 days. Okay. And that's in spite of all the advances that we've had in addiction medicine, the onset of medically assisted treatment, brain scanning, ketamine infusion treatment, all these different kinds of things that have come out. It's such a much more sophisticated field than it was when I started in 2003.
Mm.
Way more sophisticated. The clinicians are way more educated. Most of the clinicians that work in the industry now, they're LMHDs or LCSWs. Some of them are PhDs, and they're brilliant, man. They really are. And we've really come a really long way compared to what it was when I first started. But in spite of all that, right, the outcomes have been the same. So the challenge for us is to figure out why, right? And truth be told, and I can't stress this enough, but I know some people get mad at me when I say this, but a lot of times I feel like we're heading in the wrong direction. For whatever which reason. Some of it has to do with payer scrutiny and the impact of managed care on substance abuse treatment proper, right? And it has had a tremendous impact on the way that we all work with our clients, right? Again, it's, hey, we need to try to do this quicker. Right, we need to try to do this quicker. Let's throw this medication at them, and that's going to be the thing that's going to make sure that they stay sober and they don't reoffend and catch charges, or for mortality rates so they don't die. Let's throw everybody on Suboxone, and again, all those medications, they do have utility. So I'm not de-emphasizing the importance of those, but without doing the clinical component, without helping clients, over a protracted period of time, start to navigate their life, it's not going to work. If the studies show, we've all heard this, we've all sat in groups, and it's like, hey, like 1 in 10 of you guys is going to make it. Look to the left of you, look to the right of you, and you're, hopefully you're that one that stays sober, right? And we all hear that, we've all heard that, right? If that's the reality of things, right? And that's still the reality of things, why would we start taking away the components of sobriety and recovery and treatment that have been shown to work for people? That they can, why would we take away that human connection? Why would we take away the camaraderie? If just bringing on all this advances is supposed to make everything better, and then it hasn't, why take away the things that we do know work? Listen, we call AA the modern marvel of the 20th century, right? I mean, take a look at it. So, like I said, I can't stress enough how important it is that we don't, as an industry, move away from the clinical work. We can't. We can't. There is no magic pill that's going to take this away for our clients. They're going to have to do exactly what you said, which is be willing to work through the pain. And our job is to help them navigate that.
Amen. For sure. Because for me, a lot of addiction, a lot of, alcoholism, trauma, there's a disconnect, and I think human beings are designed to connect. And when we're disconnected, we just wander, and we do things to us that normally, if we were connected, we wouldn't do. So I'm disconnected. I'm not in sync with my intellectual self, my spiritual self, my creative self, my creative intelligence. So I start looking for things. I start seeking, right, to feel better, to soothe, because I got no coping skills. So I got this little genetic coding, this little brain disorder, and I do some alcohol, and I'm warm and fuzzy, and woohoo! Hey, it starts out as the ultimate lubricator. You know what I mean? Little do I know, if I got that bug, and I'll just leave it at that. If I have that bug, little do I know, gosh darn it, at the end of this trip, it ends up being the ultimate separator.
So interestingly, what do we say? I mean, addiction was the solution that worked until it stopped working.
Working.
Right? Otherwise, it never would have been positively reinforced. And I think a lot of us,
Yeah.
a lot of us when we're working with clients, we need to take a look at that. Oh, it was never good. Well, if that was the case, then
Yeah.
none of us would have gotten addicted, and the clients wouldn't have gotten addicted the way that they did. Right? They
Correct.
wouldn't. They wouldn't go to the lengths that they went to continue doing it.
Yeah.
The euphoric recall and the cognitive distortion is that, well, maybe if I do it different, it'll work again.
That's
It'll
crazy.
relieve my anxiety again. It'll
Yeah.
take away my depression again, because when I first started, it did, right? So that's something that we need to talk to the clients about a lot. And I think it's important to acknowledge, yeah, I get it. It did work for a period of time.
Yeah.
And it
100%.
might have been the only thing that helped you navigate the environment that you were in, right?
Correct.
It might have been. And we have to acknowledge that. We also have to acknowledge what we're seeing right in front of our face right now, which is that it's creating chaos for us.
Correct. Unmanageability. It's I know the value in human connection. I know the value in people experiencing their worth. I know the value in like your style, just keeping it forward, keeping it honest. And you can do that respectfully. It's all in your delivery, Like I like the way you put that before, back in the earlier part of the podcast, how, I'm going to tell you something. I'm going to be honest with you because I got respect for you. Are you ready for that? Can you, that's like the great way to do it, because I think a lot of people project honesty with kind of like this.
Sure.
And
Absolutely.
And the guy that you're working with, or gal that you're working with, they've been doing this for their whole life. And then they come to a place looking for some release, and you got this guy going,
talking down to them, and there's a power differential and all these kinds of things.
Big
right?
time.
And you're right, because they've had so many people, whether you're right, they're doing it to themselves too. But very often for a lot of our clients, it's a parent that's been doing that. Why can't you just stop? It's a wife that's doing that. Why can't you just stop? Or it's a husband that's doing that. Why can't you just stop? So we don't want to kind of reinforce and become another part of the issue. We want to be able to provide, a safe place to process and help them identify solutions, right? And they think that that's a big thing. And one of the things that I like that, part of the reason I wanted to do the show too is, obviously I know where you work, and Beachway does very much invest in the clinical programming. And, I think that that's such a big thing. And I know it kind of sounds ludicrous, but I feel like in a lot of places, the actual clinical work, again, has been put on the back burner as well, and the clinicians and the therapists and the people that work with the clients on a daily basis have kind of been, they kind of become interchangeable parts.
Yep.
So the program is the brand, or the program is the facility, or the program is the nice pool that we have, or the program is, the medical, interventions that we can do. From my perspective, I call it clinical architecture. What I'm trying to work on, and I do a lot of it here. It's it's something that I came up with in a philosophy of treatment and running a treatment center that I believe is really super important for the existence, being quite honest, of our field moving forward. Is you have to invest in the people that are working with your clients on a daily basis, right? They aren't just pieces that you could pick in and put out and all these kinds of things. The program is your clinicians and the people that are working with the clients. That is your brand. That is your brand. That is your brand identity. It's the people that work there, that are willing to spend their time and dedicate their lives to trying to help people. That is your brand. And my belief is that if you invest in those things, clients get better, and then all the things that we hope for from a business perspective get better too, right? You do the right thing, and then the business follows. And I think that what we're seeing a lot is the opposite. Well, let's put the facility together and let's throw some people in a room. And, if this guy doesn't work out, we'll just throw in this other clinician or whatever it might be. And that doesn't work. It doesn't work. The clients become nameless, faceless policies.
They pick up on it too.
In and out. And it gives our industry such a bad name.
They pick up on it too, Frank. You know that. The clients pick up on it too. They're very very observant.
Oh, you only care because I have a good insurance policy.
Yeah.
You're not really interested in helping me.
Yeah.
And again, it gives the treatment center industry a bad name. And besides that, when you do that kind of work that being quite honest doesn't give good outcomes and clients don't stay sober, all the problems that we've been having with pay and reimbursement and length of stay that's being authorized by insurance companies, they all follow suit, because what starts to happen is that, and it has happened, and you and I have both been doing this for a long time. The treatment, the insurance companies, they don't believe this works anymore. They look at it as a failing industry. Our clients don't stay sober. Why should we invest in spending money in treatment for people when the average person is going to treatment 4, 5, 6 times? They look at it as a bad investment. And I believe that, those of us that are leaders in the industry that have the ability to make changes, I believe it's our responsibility to make those changes and say, no, treatment does work.
Yes, it does.
And let's take a look at outcomes long term. Let's take a look at people stepping down through levels of service and how often they do that. Let's call people after they're done with treatment and find, how long they're staying sober. That's so important. People need to be able to see that this works. Not only the insurance companies, but being quite honest, take a look at what we see on TV every day. People are out there in the community, layman's people, they think that treatment doesn't work because that's the message that's getting communicated. Yeah. And it's wrong.
It is
treatment
wrong.
Does work.
Yes, it does. I see it with my own eyes every day. So you have a dysfunctional family, right? And you have, and in that homeostasis, you have a person that's struggling with alcoholism, right? So it's kind of like not a spectator sport. Everybody gets to play, right? Frank, man, you made me think about that. Listening to you talking about the treatment modality. It's the same principle with who's ever running the show at the treatment center. And who they're bringing in as far as the clinician goes, the nursing staff, the tech staff, how long have they been there? Are they, even though they're the clinical director, are they interviewing the tech staff? Because it's the same thing, right? If you have a sick member or a sick family,
right.
It's two people trying to get well, clients, and then you got the staff. It's just.
I've been thinking about this stuff a lot, over the last year since I took over as CEO here, and it's really been a great experience. But I wrote an article the other day, and you might have seen it. And some people that are watching the show may have seen it. I wrote an article about why a lot of therapists don't want to work in addiction treatment anymore.
I caught that on LinkedIn,
and it's really true, because again, we go, all these LCSWs and LMHCs and LMFTs, they invest a lot of money in going to school, and they really learn all the theories, and and they really want to make a difference and help. And if the industry, and it has been, if the industry is shifting towards these really short duration stays, clinicians are going in to work in these treatment programs, and all they're doing basically all day is AMA blocking. Trying to stop clients from leaving, and they never actually get to do any therapy and actually see clients get better. Why would they want to enter this field, right? We need good clinicians in this field. We need people that are talented, that want to work with the clients, but we also need to be able to provide them the support. We need to be able to provide them with a good experience, an opportunity to feel like they're making a difference. If I'm not providing those things for my clinicians, of course they're not going to stay.
Reasonable caseload,
they're not going to stay. Reasonable caseload where they're not, feeling like I got to work 65 hours a week to keep up with paperwork and all these kinds of things.
Yep.
I feel like my job at this point, as somebody that's been on the floor, and still is on the floor, but gets an opportunity to run a program is, my job is to remove those barriers for them. My job is to help try to make their job as easy as possible so they can do the kind of work that they need to do with the clients so our clients can get better. Right?
It's the bottom line.
That's really what this is about. We want our clients to stay sober, not just come back. Just come back over and over again, right?
Yeah.
And I know it sounds so simple. And for somebody that's maybe listening to this that's not involved in the field, they're like, yeah, that makes sense. That's simple. But for those of us that are working in this, unfortunately, a lot of times we see the opposite.
Yep.
We
Yep.
see the opposite, where the clinical team and the people that are working with our clients are not invested in. They're not having a good experience. They can't be their best for our clients because of some of the stressors that they're getting put under, and everybody loses.
Mm. Yeah.
And then being quite honest, the treatment center ends up not making it long term because of that as well.
Yeah, I've seen, gosh, in my almost 20 years, I've seen so many come and go. It's unbelievable. I shouldn't say nobody. I think, some of us are focused on that drugs kill drug addicts, alcohol kills alcoholics, and mental health kills people who are struggling with mental health.
Mm-hmm.
Like what I'm listening to you and I'm thinking, for me, I have to boil it down because I complicated the heck out of it most of my life, and it never worked out well, and I've been given a gift to listen to a lot of things and just boil it down as it's coming into my processor, and I have to stay focused. I have to stay mindful, just like I practice mindfulness in the morning, just like I practice my readings in the morning. I practice my mindfulness when I'm on campus or when I'm about to facilitate a group. I'm being entrusted with a group of people that their lives are on the line. And it's my duty, it's my obligation to show up for those people with the best I got, because it helps people connect again, because game recognizes game, real recognizes real. And like you were saying, we've been talking about, there's something in that transmission that's different than, say, like I'll say Suboxone, since you mentioned, there's something different in there. And that's what people are always looking for. They're looking for that difference, that calm, that soothing, a natural process. How do I ignite somebody's creative intelligence? How do I connect this person? How do I show them? Because they're just like me. Game recognizes game, real recognizes real. How do I show them that they are worthy? How do I show them that a lot of this stuff was a lie? How do I show them or ask them, who were the messengers in your life?
Mm-hmm.
And who drove that message and what drove that message? Was it their own unresolved issues? Was it their own trauma that they never worked on? And I always, trauma, if anybody ever tells you, oh, just let that go, like, what are you kidding me? What do you mean just let that go? Like there's some magic fairy dust,
I've been stuffing that stuff my entire life. That's why I'm sitting in this room.
No kidding, but it's but it's something that happened to you. It's part of your life. It's part of your story. And somebody's telling you just to let that. You need to go somewhere else and find somebody that's gonna try to teach you that that's part of your story. And it's unfortunate, but we can learn how to manage it.
Absolutely, and it takes clinicians like you and so many out there that are willing to invest that time, and the big hope for me is that you guys continue, and myself as well, continue to be able to get the amount of time to do that work, because it takes a lot of trust for somebody to be willing to go there with you.
Yeah.
It takes time.
Oh,
it takes time, and you take a look at some of our clients and how long it took them to get to this point. The idea that they're going to get better in 28 days is ludicrous, right?
Yeah.
But listen, I think a lot of the treatment centers that we all work with, they do try to get clients to go into extended care.
Yep.
They do. For me, it's almost like a non-negotiable, because I know that if somebody doesn't step into lower levels of care, it's not going to work.
Correct.
It just doesn't work, and it's not because the person doesn't want to get better. It's that A, enough time hasn't passed, and B, there hasn't been enough time to really get into the underpinnings. We're able to maybe just address some of the symptoms in that 28 days, and just chasing symptoms around, doesn't get anybody better. We need to really get into, like, where does this really come from?
Yeah.
Right? And the clients that stay sober and that have been sober for a period of time, when you talk to them and you ask them to tell you their story, they can tell you where things came from.
Oh yeah. Yeah, 100%.
They really have a very good awareness of that, and then them being willing to do that and share that with other people helps open up their eyes. They say it all the time. It's one of the oldest lines in recovery. It's the opposite of addiction is connection.
Classic, but it's true. It's so true. We have all these other fatal progressive illnesses, Frank, where, the doctor will say, okay, well, let's see what's going on in a year's time. And then during this year, you have to do this, you have to do this, you have to do this. We'll treat this. You got to make sure you take your medication on, you know, all this emphasis on long term, cancer. What is it, 3 years, 5 years? Then you're out the window, but you still get covered for checkups and all this stuff. And here we have alcoholics and addicts and people mental health, struggling with this fatal progressive illness, and it's like 28 days. It kind of blows me away a little bit sometimes, and you're making me think about it again
And
with this.
listen, it's the unfortunately it's the dog that's chasing its tail, and it's been the cycle again. It's not even just that clients don't want to do extended care, or sometimes that is the case. But I think one of the things that we're seeing a lot is that insurance companies are authorizing less and less time. Blue Cross Blue Shield just did something recently where they're only authorizing 6 days of IOP at a clip. Like, what could you really do in 6 days? And then your clinicians are fighting for additional time for the clients, right? So I think unfortunately it's a byproduct of everything that we've all seen and experienced over the last, especially down in South Florida, the last 15 years, which was, I hate to say it, there was a lot of impropriety and, overbilling and overutilization of benefits and all these kinds of things. And now that the insurance companies, they're just not having it. And they're making it so much more difficult for our clients to get the treatment that they need. I take a look at some of these utilization reviews that are coming up. I pull them twice a week for our staff, and some of the ones that I see get turned down for continued IOP, I'm like, are you kidding me? But unfortunately, again, it's a byproduct of some places not doing good work for a long time, or continuing to readmit the same client over and over and over and over and over again, and again, I think it's so important for those of us, that are working in the industry, is to have integrity about what you're doing.
And it's like,
Right.
it's a slap in the face too for somebody like you were talking about before, that's dedicated a lot of money, a lot of time, had to have a lot of discipline, right? Getting their master's degree, sitting for their licensure. It's like a smack in the face to them in a way too, because here's somebody that's trying to treat this person, that's made a huge commitment personally to get into this lane and help this person, and then you're like denying it. It's like, I mean, I don't know, Frankie. It kind of gets me. I'm getting a little frustrated.
Yeah, no, listen, I get it. I mean, it's something that I think about a lot, and I write about these things a lot. Again, I don't know if somebody's sitting down there with an actuary table, like trying to, over at the insurance company, well, let's turn down this one and approve that one. I don't know.
Yeah.
But what I do know is, from all my experience, I have seen payer scrutiny go up tremendously. Listen, 10 years ago, we were all only out of network, right? Now everybody is in network. That came from a place, right? The amount of scrutiny that they are giving for in-network contract providers, which essentially is we're signing a contract. Hey, you can treat our clients and we're going to pay you. The amount of scrutiny that they're providing for utilization review for in-network is like the same as it was 10 years ago for out-of-network for significantly less pay, right? So for anybody that's watching this, that's the layperson that's not part of the industry. Yes, 10 years ago, yes, there was treatment centers that were making 70 to 80% profit margins. That is not the case anymore.
No.
It's like any other business, 15, 20%. Treatment centers are just getting by. And unfortunately, because of payer scrutiny, what you're seeing is that in order for a lot of treatment centers to make it, it's starting to become almost like needs to become almost like a bulk business. Like, we need to bring in as many people as we can, turn over these beds as fast as we can, and all these kinds of things. The levels of care that I'm talking about, and Tim's been involved in, very much as well, these are low turnover levels of care. Clients stay for quite a bit of time. Our average length of stay here is about 130 days. We do PHP, IOP, and outpatient. So we're only admitting, 10 clients a month and discharging, 7 or 8 clients a month.
Yeah.
So, and it pays much less than the higher levels of care. You don't want to have to make a treatment center become a bulk billing facility. I call it a churn and burn.
Yeah.
And the industry unfortunately has started to turn that direction because purely out of finances, out of necessity, and it feeds into everything. Again,
Yeah.
and you have clinicians that don't want to work in places like that. Clients don't want to go to places like that. You don't have enough time to have clients get well.
Yep.
Outcomes don't look good.
Yep.
It's not working. Again, that's why I said very early on, I feel like the industry is moving in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
I feel like there needs to be more emphasis on PHP, IOP, and outpatient. There's a place for detox and residential treatment,
Yep.
but when there's 10 treatment centers opening and all 10 of them, all they're doing is detox and res, and no treatment centers opening that are doing these lower levels of care, which is where the rubber meets the road for the clients,
Oh, yeah.
there's a problem in our industry.
Yep. Yep.
And I don't know the exact solution. If I did, I would put it out there.
Yeah.
But I'm working towards finding it, and I'm definitely going to continue putting it out there on platforms like this, because I know that this part of treatment is where the clients either learn where they thrive and where they struggle, and they need this part of treatment.
Yeah, they do, big time. It's back to my core belief. It's the intimacy, it's the client care, it's the immediate response to a client's needs. It's smaller, it's better, it's cleaner, it's more intimate. I mean, you get a group with the CEO on a Monday night. Like, you can't get any better than that. A guy who's dedicated.
I love it. It's my pleasure, man. It's the most fun that I have all week.
Yeah, but if they only knew they got a guy that's been dedicated for 23 years, when he could have split at 4 o'clock, he's actually doing an evening group with them. Like, you're right, man. It's where the rubber meets the road, and you lead by example.
That's right.
That's
right. I do believe that, and I do believe that the best leaders in this industry are the ones that are still willing to get into the trenches with their staff.
Yeah.
I have no problem doing anything that this facility or my clients require. There is no big I's and little U's, right? I just, like I said, I got this title because I've been around longer than a lot of people in this industry.
Yeah, but you got two beautiful things too. You got the natural capability. You're a bright guy, man. Let's call it like it is. Let's call it like it is. But the thing that I love too is the commitment and passion. I've never had a professor, go to school after I got sober, went back to school. I never had a professor teach me heart. Never, Frank. And to me, that's still the ultimate ingredient. It's the emulsifier. It trumps everything. So, Frank, what a pleasure it was, man, to talk to you.
Man, thank you so much.
I have to, we're running out of time. So I'm hopefully, I know you agree with this. Hopefully we reach that one person that, I don't know, happened just to catch us, that's not doing well, or another
everybody has the power, ability, and freedom to get better.
Amen.
Everybody has the power, ability, and freedom to change your life.
Amen. If somebody wanted to reach out to you, get in touch with you, how would they do that?
They could call the admissions line here.
Yeah.
At Sunview Wellness, which is 710-2000. But if somebody wanted to email me
privately,
dialogue, my email address is fgalimidi, GALIMIDI @sunviewwellness.com.
Beautiful. Any last pearls, Frank,
sure,
before we split?
I just want to say for all of us that are watching this, that are in the treatment center industry, we can and have to do better.
Period. Frank, again, man, thank you so much for coming out. Thank you for giving us an hour of your valuable time. Very grateful and appreciative. And until next time, I'll speak for Frank. I don't. He's not the kind of guy you want to speak for, but with this one, I will. this time, I will. Until our next podcast, until our next phenomenal guest, Frank and I wish you peace and love. See you later, everybody.